Night fell over the city with the weight of a secret. The streetlights flickered under the thin drizzle, and the wind carried the distant scent of rain and wet leaves. Clara Montero walked slowly through the square, the sound of her own footsteps echoing like memories she didn't want to revisit. She was coming from the hospital, exhausted, yet something kept her walking with no destination, as if the silence itself were calling her. The benches were empty. The old carousel turned faintly with the breath of the wind. Laughter from another time seemed asleep in the rusted wood. Clara brushed her fingers across a broken horse and thought about how everything eventually loses its shine. Then she heard it. A small sound, a sob cutting through the air. The kind of sound that asks for help even without words. She stopped. Her heart beat faster, not from fear, but from a strange sense of knowing. The rain grew heavier, falling in thin silver threads over the ground. Behind the carousel, a small figure trembled. Clara took a deep breath before moving closer. Every step pulled her deeper into a fate she didn't yet understand. The crying came from there. A child, curled up between boxes, his body soaked, his eyes too big for that hour. Lightning tore through the sky, lighting his face for a second, pale, dirty, clutching a drenched teddy bear to his chest. Clara knelt slowly, trying not to scare him. The air smelled of fear and lost innocence. "Hey, it's okay." Her voice came out soft, almost a whisper. The boy looked up, cautious, his lips trembling. There was something familiar in his eyes, a mix of purity and pain that felt far too old. "What's your name, sweetheart?" she asked, feeling the cold slip through her coat. The boy hesitated, then answered quietly, as if confessing a secret. "Leonardo." The name hung in the air like a broken promise. A chill ran down Clara's spine. The wind howled through the trees, and the clock in the square struck 10 with a hollow, distant sound. "And where's your dad?" she asked, trying to smile. The boy hugged his bear tighter and whispered, "I lost my dad." For a moment, everything stopped. No wind, no rain, no time. Clara swallowed hard, glancing around, but there was no one. No adults, no voices, no search. Just her and the lost boy in the middle of the night. Instinct spoke louder than fear. She took off her coat and wrapped it around him. "Let's go home, okay?" The boy hesitated, then gave in. His small hands clung to her arm as if it were the only safe place left in the world. The sound of raindrops on the pavement mixed with the pounding of Clara's heart. Something about that child pulled her in, as if an invisible thread tied them together, one that chance could never explain. As they walked under the rain, Clara felt the weight of an unseen gaze, as if someone was watching them from the dark, silently witnessing that encounter. She quickened her pace, the boy stumbling beside her. Every shadow seemed to hide a secret, and every thunderclap, a warning, but she kept going. Because leaving him there was never an option. They crossed the empty street. The windows of the houses flickered with warm light, indifferent to the storm. Clara held the boy close and ran to the gate of her small apartment building. The iron was cold. The world felt colder that night. She climbed the stairs in a rush, each step echoing like heartbeats in the silence. Inside, warmth returned. The sound of the rain faded into a distant murmur. Clara set the boy on the couch, took off her wet coat, and exhaled. "You're safe now," she whispered, unaware those words would become a much bigger promise than she could ever keep. The boy looked at her with deep, tired eyes. "Will he find me?" he asked. The question hung there, heavy, like thunder that refuses to fall. Clara pretended not to understand, but she felt the weight of it. "Who?" she whispered. The boy hugged the bear tighter and looked away. "The bad man." Her heart skipped a beat. She wanted to say something comforting, but fear dried her throat. Deep down she knew this was only the beginning. The nurse took a towel and gently wiped the boy's face, her every move filled with tenderness, trying to hide the fear. "No one's going to hurt you, I promise." The words sounded strong, but the boy's eyes said otherwise. As if he'd heard that before, and no longer believed in promises. The whistle of the kettle broke the silence. Clara stood up, made a simple soup, and the warm smell filled the air. The boy watched in silence. There was something strange in his gaze, a quiet wisdom, almost painful, as if he carried too many memories for such a small body. When she set the bowl in front of him, he only murmured, "Thank you." "Mum." Clara froze. The word hit her like a whisper from fate. She wanted to say she wasn't, that he was mistaken, but she couldn't. She let the moment be. Sometimes love arrives disguised as confusion. Sometimes destiny pretends to be a mistake. And that night, Clara chose silence. The boy fell asleep soon after, the teddy bear by his side, his face peaceful. Clara watched him for a long time, his gentle breathing blending with the wind outside. It felt like time had stopped for the two of them. But somewhere in the city, something was moving. A distant engine, headlights cutting through the rain, and the beginning of an unrelenting search. Outside, the rain didn't let up. The city seemed to hold its breath. A man sat inside a black car staring at a crumpled photograph, the boy's face. The same boy sleeping quietly on Clara's couch. Fate was drawing its invisible line between two souls about to collide, and neither would come out of this storm the same. On the wall, the clock struck midnight. Clara lit a candle, not knowing why. Maybe to chase away the emptiness. Maybe to remind herself that there was still light. The flame trembled, reflected in the boy's eyes. Outside, thunder blended with a distant siren. The world was changing, and she didn't yet know how much. In the silence that followed, Clara leaned against the window and watched the rain fall over the square. The same carousel turned slowly, as if dancing with the ghosts of the past. And somewhere deep inside her chest, something new began to stir, a feeling both sweet and bitter. The sense that their meeting hadn't been chance at all, but destiny disguised as coincidence. Morning came grey, with the sound of rain tapping against the glass and the faint scent of cold coffee in the air. Clara woke before sunrise, her body tired but her mind alert. The boy was still asleep on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, the stuffed bear held tightly in his arms. For the first time in a long while, the apartment felt alive. But there was also a different kind of silence, the kind that comes before something inevitable. She made warm soup and woke him gently, afraid to startle him. Leonardo opened his eyes slowly, as if still trapped inside a dream. "I was scared," he murmured. Clara sat beside him, her heart tightening at the sight of his small, fragile face. "You're safe now," she said, though she wasn't sure she believed it. The world outside was no place for fragile promises. As he ate, she watched his every move, the way his eyes scanned every corner. Alert, as if expecting someone to walk through the door at any moment. Clara felt a knot in her throat. Something about that boy stirred an ancient instinct in her, the urge to protect, even without knowing from what. It came from somewhere deep in her soul, from a wound that words could never name. Later, the phone rang. A dry, persistent sound that shattered the fragile calm of the morning. Clara answered, but there was only static on the other end. No voice, no breathing, just silence, the kind that frightens more than any threat. When she hung up, she noticed the boy standing by the door, tense. "Was it him?" he asked, with the fear of a child and the certainty of an adult. Clara couldn't answer. She only knelt down, holding his cold hands. "No, sweetheart. It was just a wrong number." But the lie broke in her mouth, fragile and thin. Leonardo looked at her as if he could see through the words, as if he recognized in her eyes the same uncertainty that lived in his. For a brief moment, time dissolved between them, and their need to protect each other became one and the same. The day dragged on. Clara washed the boys' clothes, hung them by the window, and turned on the TV just to fill the emptiness. But emptiness never really fills. On screen, the news reported a city on alert, a shooting at a mansion on the outskirts, masked men, a disappearance. The words ran across the screen like sharp blades. Son of businessman Luca Bellarosa missing after criminal attack. Her heart froze. She turned toward the couch. The same face, the same eyes. The same child. The floor seemed to vanish beneath her feet. Her breathing grew shallow, the air suddenly heavy. The son of the most feared man in the city was sleeping in her living room. Fate was playing with her, testing how far love and fear could coexist. She turned off the TV abruptly, trying to convince herself she could ignore what she knew. But the mind doesn't obey fear. Leonardo stirred, opened his eyes, and asked, "Is everything okay, Mum?" The word hit her again, harder this time. "Yes," she replied, her voice trembling. But she knew it wasn't, and maybe never would be again. The clock struck 9. The phone rang once more, and this time she let it. She watched the boy playing with his bear, the soft, innocent sound clashing with the chaos that surrounded him. Her instincts told her to call the police, to hand the child over, to fix what wasn't hers to fix. But her heart said something else, something impossible to ignore. When she finally picked up the phone, her hands were shaking. She dialed, waited for the line. "Police department. Good morning." The voice on the other end sounded distant, bureaucratic, indifferent. Clara explained, speaking between breaths, fear leaking through every word. The reply was dry. "All patrols are busy, ma'am. Please stay calm. We'll send someone over." She hung up. She knew no one was coming. The sound of rain filled the apartment again, this time like a lament. Leonardo was drawing with old colored pencils Clara had kept for years. He drew a house, a man in a suit, a woman in a dress. In the middle, himself and the bear. "That's my family," he said proudly. Clara smiled through the ache in her chest. Deep down, she wished it were true, that the world could be that simple. That night, the boy began to have nightmares. He cried out, calling the name Luca between sobs. Clara held him close, rocking him gently like a mother would. "It's okay, my love." But the name echoed in her mind, every syllable a warning. Luca Bellarosa, the name that made judges tremble and criminals bow. The man who ruled the city from the shadows. And now, unknowingly, she had defied him. The hours crawled by. Clara couldn't sleep. She paced the living room, glancing at the boy every few minutes. Each breath he took reminded her that she was alive, but also that danger was near. In the window's reflection she saw her own face, pale, tired, torn between duty and a forbidden tenderness that had begun to grow without her consent. Fear and love always walk side by side. Morning came, and the rain had stopped. The sun tried to break through the clouds, but the sky stayed grey. Clara made coffee and looked out the window. A black car was parked across the street, engine running, windows dark. Her heart began to race. She pretended not to notice, stepping back from the curtain slowly. The same instinct that protects also knows when to run, and she knew that silence was hiding something. Leonardo was still asleep when she sat beside him. She ran her fingers through his damp hair, taking a deep breath. "I'll protect you, sweetheart. No matter what." The promise was sincere, even if reckless. She didn't know what kind of power she was standing against, but something inside her, something greater than reason, was pushing her toward that fate. Love and danger always walk together. The phone rang for the third time. Clara didn't answer. She walked to the kitchen, turned on the old radio, and turned up the volume to drown out the sound. But even then she heard it, the engine outside being cut off, a gate slamming, footsteps, the world narrowed. Every heartbeat was a warning. Instinct doesn't lie. It screams when the soul recognizes danger before the mind does. The boy woke up, still half asleep. "Is someone outside?" he asked. Clara tried to smile, but fear betrayed her eyes. "No one, sweetheart. Just the wind." But even the wind seemed to have stopped. Shadows moved slowly through the cracks in the window. Time itself seemed to hold its breath, and Clara realized there was no turning back. The simple life she once knew ended right there, in that moment. She turned off the lights, lifted the boy into her arms, and carried him to the bedroom. She closed the curtains, sat on the floor, and waited. The ticking of the clock hit like a hammer. Everything's going to be fine, she whispered to herself again and again. But her body trembled. Her breath came short. Sometimes fear is the first step toward love. And in that moment, love had just begun. Outside, the car drove away. The sound of the engine faded into the night. Clara let out the air trapped in her lungs and held the boy tightly. "We're safe," she whispered. But deep down she knew that safety was only a pause between two storms, and the next one was already on its way, disguised as fate, ready to sweep them both away. Across the city, the sound of engines echoed through narrow streets. A line of black cars cut through the night, headlights reflecting in puddles like the gleam of a silent hunt. Inside the lead car, Luca Bellarosa stared at the map glowing on the dashboard. His eyes were fixed, his face tense, his hands steady on the wheel. The man who once commanded armies of shadows now searched for only one thing: his son. Since the shooting, his world had turned to ashes. The house destroyed, the memory of his wife still haunting his dreams, and Leonardo's laughter echoing through what was left. Luca didn't believe in miracles, only in revenge, in power, in control. But that night, something broke through the armor. Fear, the kind even mafia kings can't hide. Search every street, every alley, every face. His voice was low, but carried restrained fury. His men obeyed without question, as if every word were law. The entire city seemed to sense the change in the air. A predator was on the move, and silence followed him like a shadow. But even predators feel pain when they lose what they love. On the seat beside him, a crumpled photograph. Luca ran his thumb over his son's face, the smile frozen in time. That picture was all that remained of the humanity in a man who had long forgotten how to feel. Grief had hardened everything except love. And that love was now his only weakness, an open wound the universe seemed eager to test. The radio played a report about the attack everyone was talking about. Businessman's son missing after mansion shooting. The words felt like mockery. He switched it off with a sharp motion, his eyes drifting to the rain-streaked window. Outside, the world carried on, indifferent, but inside Luca something was breaking. Love and hate were mixing, poison and wine. Meanwhile, Clara tucked the blanket around Leonardo, unaware that his father was crossing the city in search of a shadow. Fate was weaving its invisible threads, preparing the encounter that would change everything. The nurse stared out the window, her heart restless. Luca stared at the horizon, his heart hollow. Two worlds divided by guilt, on a collision course. Luca's phone rang. "We found something," said a voice on the other end. He clenched his fist. Each second was a blow to his chest. "Where?" he asked. The silence before the reply stretched long. The square, the spinning ride, the bear, his breath caught, the carousel, the same place where it all began, and where destiny seemed determined to close the circle. Luca ordered the cars to split up. The rain returned, thin and persistent, like a memory refusing to die. The square was empty when he arrived. The carousel turned slowly, moved by the wind. On the ground, a soaked teddy bear. He knelt down, his trembling hands touching the toy. That small object carried more pain than any bullet. Love, sometimes, is the shot we never see coming. His men watched in silence. None dared to interrupt their boss's grief. Luca held the bear to his chest, his face wet with rain, or tears. He couldn't tell anymore. Find him. Alive. His voice was steady, but his eyes said something else. Despair. The kind of despair that turns even the most feared of men into a ghost of himself. In the hours that followed, Naples seemed to breathe under watch. Whole neighborhoods searched, alleys combed, eyes scanning the shadows. Luca didn't sleep, didn't eat, didn't speak. He only waited. Somewhere deep down he felt it, the boy was alive. It was an irrational certainty, but it burned true. The kind of truth you don't explain, only carry, heavy as a soul at war. In his office, the photograph of his wife seemed to watch him. "I failed," he whispered, leaning against the desk. Memories cut through like blades. The scream, the fire, the chaos. He couldn't forgive himself for any of it. But now there was one last chance, a fragile flame among ashes. Bring his son back, or die trying. The difference no longer mattered. Meanwhile, Clara watched the boy play with his freshly dried bear. There was a new light in his eyes, something that mixed hope and trauma. She didn't know the father's name nor the weight it carried. But fate, always impatient, was already preparing the next move. Sometimes love arrives before truth. Sometimes truth comes only to destroy love. Luca descended into the city's underworld. Alleys, docks, nameless faces. He offered rewards. He threatened. He begged. The man who once bowed to no one was now pleading. "Whoever's seen my son, tell me." His voice echoed into the heavy air. Men feared him, but at that moment he wasn't a king. He was just a father, and that made him dangerous in another way. Across the city, Clara received a call from the hospital. They needed her for an emergency shift. She hesitated, looking at the sleeping boy. The choice burned inside her. Leave Leonardo alone or take him with her. She chose the impossible, carried him in her arms, wrapped in a blanket. The rain was falling again. With every step, fate tightened its grip. Lucas stopped at a street corner, staring at the reflection of his own soul in a cracked glass window. A man without his son is nothing but a shadow, he thought. And in that instant he made a vow. He would find Leonardo, even if he had to walk through hell to do it. Love, when wounded, always chooses pain as its fuel. And Luca Bellarosa was made of fire. The city slept under the weight of fear. Lightning tore across the sky. Clara walked fast, the boy in her arms, her face hidden beneath a hood. At that same moment, Luca crossed a parallel avenue. Two lines drawn by fate, nearly touching, unaware of each other. One breath was all it would take to unite them. And that breath was already coming, cold, inevitable, divine. The clock struck 3 a.m. Luca rested the teddy bear on the dashboard and closed his eyes. "Where are you, my little one?" The rain answered in whispers, tapping against the glass. Deep down he knew, the universe never takes without giving back. And sometimes, it gives in ways that change everything. The man searching for his son was about to find something he wasn't looking for, an angel. 2 days had passed since that night of rain. Clara barely slept, her body exhausted, her mind restless. The boy played on the rug, unaware of the weight of the silence surrounding her. Outside, the sky was the color of lead. The news spoke of massive searches, helicopters, rewards. But her fear wasn't of the police, it was of something greater. Something unseen, slowly drawing closer. On the morning of the third day, Clara decided to do what was right. She grabbed her bag, put on her coat, and called the boy. "We're going to the police station, Leonardo." Her voice trembled, but her eyes were steady. Doing what's right often hurts more than doing what's wrong. As they stepped outside, the air felt heavy, as if the world itself were watching, the kind of step that changes destinies. The streets were wet, the asphalt reflecting the dull sky. Clara looked around, uneasy. A black car appeared in the reflection of a shop window. Then another, and another. She quickened her pace, heart racing. "Stay close to me, sweetheart." Leonardo gripped her hand tightly, the teddy bear slipping from his grasp unnoticed. The sound of engines revving made the ground vibrate. Before she could react, 2 cars swerved in front of her, blocking the street. Men in suits stepped out, their expressions hard, their movements precise. "Mrs. Montero," one of them asked. His tone left no room for escape. Clara clutched the boy, her body tense. "Who are you?" No answer, just a gesture toward the car. She looked at Leonardo and understood there was no choice. Inside, the air smelled of leather and fear. Silence filled the space, broken only by the boy's breathing. Clara tried to control her panic, eyes fixed on the window, memorizing every turn. "Where are you taking us?" she asked. No reply. One of the men spoke quietly into a phone. "We found her. Fate had delivered its verdict. There was no way out. The car passed through tall iron gates, down an avenue lined with trees that seemed to watch their arrival. The mansion rose like a shadow, imposing, cold, almost sacred in its solitude. Clara stepped out with the boy in her arms, the icy wind cutting through the air. The doors opened. Inside stood a man, tall, dark suit, steady eyes. Luca Bellarosa, the name she feared without ever seeing the face. He said nothing at first. Just watched. The look of a man who had lost everything and trusted no one. Clara met his gaze, though her body trembled. "Where's my son?" he asked, his voice hoarse, almost a growl restrained by pain. The silence hit like a blow. "Home," she answered without hesitation. "Safe. But what he needs is a father, not soldiers." The words cut through the air like a blade. The men behind him glanced at each other, ready to act, but Luca raised a hand. That single gesture silenced them all. His eyes, cold moments before, shifted, a brief spark, almost human, crossing them. The courage of that woman disarmed him. Few had ever dared to face him. No one had ever done it with compassion. "You don't know who you're talking to," he murmured, stepping closer. Clara took a step back but didn't look away. "I know enough," she said. "I've seen the fear in the news. And I've seen the pain in your son's eyes." Luca inhaled deeply, his fist clenched. The air between them seemed to vibrate. Two forces, opposite yet drawn to the same void. "Where is he?" he demanded again. "Where is Leonardo?" "With me," she replied, steady and calm. "And he'll stay with me until I'm sure you're his father, and not the man who made him afraid of the dark." The silence that followed was absolute. A distant thunder rumbled. Luca took a step forward. "You're bold." "No," she said. "Just tired of seeing the innocent pay for the monsters adults create." Her voice didn't waver. For the first time, his did. Luca ran a hand through his hair, fighting anger, or maybe admiration. "Get the car. We're going to get my son." Clara hesitated. "Don't approach him like that. He doesn't trust anyone." He looked at her again, closer this time. "But he trusts you?" she answered without thinking. "More than I trust myself." Time stopped. Truth is often born in silence. The ride back was tense. Luca led in the first car, Clara and the boy in the second. Leonardo slept in her arms, his face peaceful. She watched him, and for a moment forgot who was driving ahead, forgot the danger waiting for her. Love has that power. It makes you believe you can save someone, even if it costs you everything. They reached the building. Luca stepped out first, scanning the area like a predator sensing threat. When Clara brought the boy, he froze. Leonardo opened his eyes and saw him. For a second, time didn't exist. "Daddy?" The word came out weak, but enough to shatter the man. Luca dropped to his knees. The mask fell. And for the first time in years, he cried. Clara stood still, watching. The man everyone feared now looked like nothing more than a broken father. The embrace between them was pure, almost sacred. Pain and love tangled in the same breath. Clara stepped closer, letting the moment unfold. Luca lifted his gaze, his eyes wet. "You saved him," he said. "But now, you know too much." Her heart froze. For a moment, she thought it was the end. The men around them waited for orders. But then Luca finished his sentence. "That's why. You'll stay under my protection." His tone was firm, but there was something else hidden beneath it, a thread of feeling he couldn't name. Clara took a deep breath, feeling the ground vanish beneath her feet. Fear mixed with fascination, and destiny, silent as ever, simply smiled. That night, the rain returned, as if the heavens knew that fate needed cleansing. From the window, Clara watched the black car parked in front of the building. There was no choice. Luca had decided. And when a man like him decides, the world obeys. She knew that stepping through that gate meant leaving behind everything simple. But some choices don't ask for permission, they just happen. Luca entered the apartment without warning. The air grew tense, as if the small space couldn't hold his presence. His gaze was sharp, his suit soaked, his breath heavy. But when Leonardo ran toward him and wrapped his arms around his legs, time stopped. That small, honest embrace disarmed the most feared man in Naples. And for a moment, silence became the only possible sound. Luca knelt, his eyes glassy. He touched his son's face with hands that had only ever known the weight of violence. Now they trembled. "Are you all right, my little one?" Leonardo nodded, clutching the teddy bear to his chest. Clara watched quietly, her heart torn between relief and fear. In front of her, the monster had turned human, and when humanity returns, it always hurts. The man stood slowly, his gaze returning to Clara. "You protected him. I don't know why, but you did." She folded her arms, steady. "Because someone had to." He exhaled, the air between them thick, almost solid. "Now that you know who we are, you can't stay alone. It's dangerous." Clara held his gaze. "And being with you isn't?" A faint, almost sorrowful smile crossed his face. "The difference is, with me, danger has a name." She didn't reply. Just watched him. His face bore marks that power couldn't hide: fatigue, guilt, loneliness. For a moment, she saw not the mafia boss, but the man the world had forgotten to forgive. And that kind of vision changes everything. Even fear takes a different shape. "Pack what you need. You and the boy are coming with me." His voice carried authority, but something inside it sounded like care. Clara looked at Leonardo, playing with his bear on the couch. Her heart screamed to stay, but instinct whispered otherwise. Sometimes the urge to protect leads us straight into danger. She nodded silently. Fate, after all, had already decided. The drive to the mansion was made under rain. The car windows fogged, reflections of streetlights blending with the shadows. Clara stared outside, trying to understand what she was stepping into. Luca sat beside her, silent. Between them the air pulsed. Fear, curiosity, something still without a name. Outside, lightning split the sky, briefly illuminating his face. And in that instant, she saw it. Pain, and something else. Faith. When they arrived, the iron gates opened like an ancient secret. The Bellarosa mansion rose atop the hill, imposing, sorrowful. Clara stepped out, pulling her coat tight around her. Leonardo held her hand. The wind carried the scent of wet earth and danger. "Welcome to hell," one of the guards muttered. But when Luca opened the door, hell seemed quieter than heaven. Inside, the house was grand but hollow. Old paintings, heavy drapes, echoes of a past that refused to rest. Clara felt the chill of marble beneath her feet and the weight of unseen eyes. Every corridor seemed to guard memories that weren't hers. And yet, something about that place drew her in, as if something within its walls was waiting to be healed. Leonardo ran to a corner, laughing for the first time since they'd arrived. The sound of it echoed through the hall like a blessing. Luca watched, and a faint smile flickered across his face. "He hasn't laughed since that night," he said quietly. Clara looked at him, surprised. Children laugh again when they feel love. The words lingered between them, heavy and too true to ignore. That night, Clara made soup in the old mansion kitchen. The servants watched in silence, as if unsure what they were witnessing, an ordinary woman standing in the heart of a king's domain. Luca entered without a sound, standing in the doorway. The steam from the pot curled upward, and for a moment, the smell of warm food felt stronger than fear. "It's been a long time since this house smelled like that," he murmured. Clara didn't answer. She simply set 2 bowls on the table. "Wait. Even strong men need rest." Luca hesitated, then sat down. The scene felt out of time, the mafia boss and the nurse sharing a quiet meal under dim light. Neither of them knew it yet, but something was shifting. Sometimes, love begins disguised as shared silence. After the boy fell asleep, Clara wandered through the mansion's long corridors. The walls seemed to breathe stories. Portraits watched with painted eyes full of melancholy. She stopped in front of one, a woman in a blue dress, serene and beautiful. "My wife," said a voice behind her. "Luca's." His tone was low, wounded. "She died a year ago." Time froze. Clara turned slowly. "I'm sorry." He stepped closer. "Don't be. Just help me understand why God sent you now." The words came out like a confession. Clara stood still, her heart racing. Sometimes souls recognize each other before words ever do. And in that instant, something existed between them. Something neither reason nor sin could erase. Luca sighed, his eyes dropping to the floor. "You saved my son. And maybe you saved what was left of me." The voice that once commanded fear now trembled. Clara didn't know what to say. She just looked at him, a man torn between guilt and gratitude. And there, in the quiet space between two broken hearts, something began to bloom. Something without a name, already burning in both. Clara returned to the boy's room. The soft sound of his breathing soothed her. She sat in the armchair and closed her eyes. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. Somewhere in the house, Luca walked alone through the halls like a ghost who hadn't yet found rest. Both were bound by the same fate, to learn that even in darkness, there is refuge for those who still believe in love. The days passed slowly inside the mansion. Time felt different there, as if the clocks refused to move forward. Clara woke early, made coffee, and heard nothing but the distant crash of waves against the cliffs. The house was so vast that even the silence seemed to have its own hallways. And yet she always felt that something or someone was watching her. Leonardo ran through the gardens, laughing, the stuffed bear always in his hands. The boy seemed to be adapting, but Clara saw a trace of sadness in his eyes. His joy was real, but fragile, like glass ready to crack. Luca watched from a distance, standing on the shadowed balconies. He rarely approached, as if afraid that his presence might shatter what little innocence his son still had left. At night, Clara would glimpse him, always alone, always lost in thought. Sometimes in the study, sometimes on the terrace, a glass of wine in hand, and his gaze lost in the sea. The wind swayed the curtains, carrying the scent of salt and the cries of seagulls. There was a pain in him that power couldn't cure, the pain of a man who had lost everything but still pretended to control the world. One night, Clara heard footsteps in the corridor. The clock struck 3. Her room, heart pounding. At the end of the hallway, a door stood slightly open, a faint light spilling through the crack. She approached quietly. Inside, Luca sat surrounded by old photographs spread across the desk. Him, his wife, and their son. His hand trembled as he touched one. "Why do I keep looking at these?" he whispered, unaware she was there. Clara stepped forward. "Because love doesn't have an off switch." He turned, startled. His tired eyes met hers, and for a moment, neither of them breathed. The silence between them was almost sacred. Luca looked away, ashamed of his own vulnerability. "You should be sleeping," he muttered. "And you should let the past sleep too," she replied softly before walking away. The next day, the air felt different. Clara noticed strange looks from the staff, whispers that faded as she walked by. There was something unspoken, something the mansion was hiding. In the kitchen, one of the maids warned her in a whisper, "Not everything here is what it seems. Some things are better left unknown." Clara froze. Fear and curiosity walked hand in hand, and she had never been the type to turn back from the unknown. That afternoon, Luca appeared in the living room carrying Leonardo in his arms. The boy laughed, and for a moment the house felt alive again. Clara smiled. "You're learning to be a father after all." He met her eyes with a faint smile. "With you around, even that seems possible." The words caught her off guard. The tone wasn't seductive, it was grateful. But sometimes gratitude is just the first disguise of love. The following days were lighter. Clara cared for Leonardo, read him stories, filled the garden with laughter. Luca watched from afar, rediscovering life through her eyes. But peace always carries a price. One night, Clara heard muffled voices downstairs. An argument. "She can't stay here, Luca," said a cold, commanding female voice. "You're forgetting who you are." Clara crept down a few steps. The woman continued, "That woman is a liability. People are talking. What if the press finds out?" Luca's reply was calm but tense. "She saved my son. And as long as he wants her here, no one's taking her away." The woman's name echoed like a warning. Vittoria, his sister-in-law. Poison disguised as family. Clara went back upstairs before she was noticed. In her room, fear and instinct returned, pulsing like a heartbeat. Something was about to happen. She could feel it. The mansion had eyes, and not all of them were kind. In the mirror, she saw her reflection, stronger now, but also more fragile. "What am I doing here?" she whispered. But deep down, she already knew. Sometimes the soul recognizes its place before the body does. The next morning, Vittoria appeared for the first time. Tall, elegant, her smile sharp as a blade. "So you're the heroic nurse?" she said, scanning Clara from head to toe. Clara kept her composure. "I just did what anyone would do." "That's where you're wrong," Vittoria replied, smiling coldly. "Around here, no one does anything without wanting something in return." The silence that followed was sharper than any insult. After Vittoria left, Luca entered the room. Clara looked at him, her eyes steady. "She doesn't want me here." He sighed. "She doesn't want anyone reminding me I can still feel." His voice was quiet, almost confessional. Clara said nothing. She just looked at him, the powerful man, surrounded by walls and fears, trying to remember what it meant to trust. His gaze said what his words couldn't. "Don't go." That night, Leonardo came down with a fever. Clara stayed by his side, changing compressors, whispering prayers. Luca entered the room silently. "You don't have to do this alone," he said. She looked up, exhaustion in her eyes. "What else do I have if not to care?" He stepped closer. "Caring is easy. Trusting is hard." The words lingered between them, heavy in the warm air of the room. Hours later, the fever broke. Clara sighed in relief, her fingers still intertwined with the boy's. Luca stood quietly in the doorway, watching. The scene was simple, but it struck him like a blow. There was something in Clara, a quiet strength he couldn't name, and maybe that was what frightened him most. The power of someone who could heal him without even trying. The next morning, life resumed. Leonardo played in the garden while Clara read beneath a tree. Luca approached, without bodyguards, without the weight of his title, just himself. "I can't remember the last time I saw my son laugh like that," he said. Clara smiled softly. "Love is contagious." He nodded, looking toward the horizon. "Or dangerous." The words hung in the air, ambiguous, too true to deny. Afternoons in the mansion became quietly intense. Small gestures, a lingering look, an accidental touch, a restrained smile, began to mean more than words. Love grew in forbidden soil, nourished by guilt and hope. The house seemed to feel it too. The walls held secrets, and the sea breeze carried promises neither dared to speak aloud. But every calm hides the shadow of a storm. One night Clara heard the sound of breaking glass. She ran to the corridor. No one. Only Leonardo's teddy bear on the floor, torn open, its eyes missing. A shiver ran down her spine. Someone was sending a message. And she knew. Vittoria wasn't the kind of woman who made empty threats. The refuge was about to become a prison. The night fell heavy over the Bellerosa mansion. The wind swept in from the sea, carrying the deep sound of waves crashing against the rocks. Clara couldn't sleep. The image of the torn teddy bear haunted her like an omen. Someone was trying to warn her, or frighten her, but fear no longer felt the same. Now it came mixed with a strange determination she couldn't explain, the kind born from loving someone you were never meant to love. The next morning, Clara descended the stairs in silence. The hallways felt colder, longer. The servants avoided her gaze as if everyone knew something she didn't. At the breakfast table, Luca read the newspaper, eyes fixed on an article that clearly didn't matter. Pretending things were normal was an art he'd mastered. But Clara could see the exhaustion behind his face, the kind that comes from fighting invisible wars. "Luca, can I ask you something?" Her voice was soft but steady. He looked up, surprised. "Depends on the question." She took a deep breath. What really happened the night of the shooting? The silence that followed was almost tangible. The ticking clock seemed to scratch at the walls. Luca set the paper down, his eyes heavy. "Not everything is what it seems, Clara, and sometimes the truth is the worst kind of enemy." She didn't look away. "I deserve to know." "Leonardo wakes up screaming every night. He dreams of fire, of people shouting. And he keeps saying your name." Luca's fists clenched. That night wasn't an attack from outside. It came from within. The words hit like stones. Clara frowned. "What do you mean?" He hesitated. "Someone in the family wanted power, and they took everything from me, even the right to grieve." The name came out of him like poison. "Vittoria." Clara's heart sank. The pieces began to fall into place, the glances, the whispers, the threats. She planned everything. Luca continued. "The ambush, the shooting, the kidnapping. I just didn't know Leonardo survived." His voice faltered. "Not until you." The look he gave her carried gratitude, guilt, and love, disguised as pain. Clara stepped back, trembling. "So it was her. She's the one who tried to kill you?" Luca nodded. "And she failed." "But when they fail, they come back crueler." The wind from the window stirred the curtains. "Does she know I'm here?" Clara asked. "She does now." His answer was cold, like a verdict. Fear crept back through the house like an old guest returning home. That afternoon, Clara overheard Vittoria on the phone, her tone sharp, venomous. "He's blind. He doesn't see what that woman is doing here. She's weakening him, and it's going to cost us." Clara's heart pounded. She rushed back to her room and began packing her things. But before she could leave, the door opened. Luca stood there. "Where are you going?" His voice was low, controlled. "You can't leave now. They're watching you, she whispered. "Vittoria doesn't act alone," he said. "She has men loyal to her inside this house. And if they sense you know too much, they won't hesitate." His eyes were hard, but his voice carried desperation. "Then why did you bring me here?" she asked. "Because if something happens to you, I don't want to live to see it." The words escaped him, and she finally understood what he had been hiding. That night, the air grew heavier. Dinner was silent, every glance charged with meaning. Vittoria raised her glass of red wine, smiling that perfect, poised smile. Family, together again. Just like old times. Clara felt the venom in her tone, the icy stare aimed her way. Luca tried to stay composed, but his fingers tapped restlessly on the table. The wolf was pretending not to smell blood. Later, Clara slipped quietly into the study. She needed answers. She searched through drawers, opened files, read papers. Between the documents, she found an old photograph. Luca, Vittoria, and his wife at a party, all smiling. But something in Vittoria's eyes betrayed the mask. Envy was visible, alive. On the back of the photo, a date, the day before the shooting, and a note. "If she no longer exists, everything will be mine." Clara's heart raced. She pocketed the photo and then heard footsteps, turned to leave, but a hand grabbed her arm. Vittoria, the cold smile, the heavy perfume. "Lost, nurse?" Clara forced a calm tone. "I was looking for Leonardo's room." "Of course you were," Vittoria said, her voice cutting like glass. "You look like someone who likes to search where she shouldn't." The silence between them was the quiet before the war. That night Clara didn't sleep. Every creak in the wood, every distant sound felt like a threat. Leonardo had another nightmare. The fire, Mummy. The fire's coming back. Clara held him tight, her body trembling. Nothing's going to hurt you. But the words felt empty, because deep down she knew the fire was returning. And it was coming from inside the house. The inferno was waking again. In the morning, Clara went to find Luca. He was in the study, staring out at the sea. "There's something you need to see." She handed him the photo. He gripped it tightly, his face hardening. "I should have ended this a long time ago." His voice trembled between regret and rage. "You don't understand, Clara. Vittoria is the poison that runs through this family's veins. And now you're standing in her way." Clara took a deep breath. "Then let's leave. Take Leonardo, and we'll disappear." Luca looked at her, and for a moment she saw the man, not the criminal. "I can't run from what I am. As long as I exist, they'll come after us." He stepped closer, slowly. "But if something happens to me, take him. Promise me." She shook her head, eyes brimming. "Don't ask me that." He leaned his forehead against hers. "Then teach me how to have faith." The hours that followed were long and tense. The mansion felt like it was holding its breath, the kind of silence that comes before tragedy. Clara noticed the guards' glances shifting, the sound of their boots heavier in the halls. Luca tried to act normal, but fear had already settled in. "They're planning something," he whispered. "I can feel it." And the air did feel heavier, thick with destiny drawing near. As night fell, Clara heard engines in the distance. Cars. Many of them. The same sound she'd heard that first night in the square. The past was returning. Relentless. Luca rose suddenly. "Stay with the boy. Don't open the door." She grabbed his arm. "Luca, no." But he only looked at her and said, "Love doesn't protect us, Clara. It condemns us." Then he walked away, disappearing down the hallway like a shadow on its way to sacrifice. Night fell without warning. The sea roared outside, and the mansion seemed to breathe fear. Clara was closing the windows when she heard the first sound, distant, muffled, but unmistakable. Engines. Many of them. Her heart pounded. Leonardo slept, unaware of the danger drawing near. Downstairs, voices echoed. Orders. Footsteps. The sound of the inevitable. Luca descended the stairs with the calm of a man who had already survived hell. One look was enough to know there was no time left. "Bring the car round back," he ordered. His men ran, guns in hand, though fear was written all over their faces. He knew who was coming. Vittoria. And he knew what she wanted. Power isn't a throne. It's a curse that always returns to claim what it once took. Clara appeared at the top of the stairs. "Luca, please. Let's run. Now." He looked up, face hard. "It's too late, Clara. Destiny doesn't wait." His voice was steady, but his eyes begged forgiveness. "Take Leonardo. Go through the back." She stepped down, resolute. "I'm not leaving you." Her courage disarmed him more than any gun ever could. "You're insane." Maybe, but not alone. Outside, headlights sliced through the darkness. Armed men surrounded the gates, the beams of light flickering across the old stone walls. Luca drew his pistol, quick, precise. "Protect the boy." The rain returned, thick and violent, as if the heavens themselves were crying for what was about to happen. The crash of thunder blended with the echo of gunfire. The Bellarosa house was once again a stage for tragedy. Clara ran to Leonardo's room, her heart beat loud in her throat. "Wake up, sweetheart, we have to go." The boy blinked, disoriented. "Mummy, is the fire back?" She hugged him tight, her voice trembling. "No, it's just the rain." But even she knew it was a lie. Down the hall, glass shattered. The danger was already inside. She lifted him into her arms, fear turning into courage. Luca fought Vittoria's men in the main hall. Every shot echoed like thunder in his chest. Marble cracked, blood stained the carpets. He fought not to win, but to stop the end. Amid the chaos, he heard it, her name. Clara. The shout came instinctively, louder than the gunfire. When love is real, it always screams louder than fear. Vittoria entered through the front doors, a black umbrella in hand, her gaze calm. Brother. Always so dramatic. Luca raised his weapon, but she only smiled. You know what annoys me about you? That obsession with thinking you can change fate, and you think you can control it. The silence. Between them lasted a second, and then chaos screamed again. Clara appeared at the top of the stairs, Leonardo in her arms. Vittoria saw her and smiled. So that's the saintly nurse? Her tone dripped with venom. Put the boy down, dear. He doesn't belong to you. Clara held him tighter. He doesn't belong to your hatred. The shock came before the answer. The window shattered behind her, the echo cutting the air. Luca shouted, Clara, down! Time slowed. She ran, descending the stairs, the boy shielded against her chest. Bullets ripped through the air like bolts of fury. Luca charged forward, fighting off the traitors, his face streaked with blood and rain. Take him! He roared. But Clara didn't run. The instinct to protect is stronger than the instinct to live. And in that moment, she did the unthinkable, placed the boy behind a column, and turned back. One of the men aimed at Leonardo. Clara threw herself in front of him. The gunshot cracked, dry, final. Her body fell to its knees, her coat blooming red. The teddy bear rolled across the floor, soaked in rain and tears. Luca turned just in time to see her fall. And in that instant, everything inside him broke. The man who once ruled the world lost control of himself. The sound that came from him wasn't human. He charged the gunman with the rage of someone who had lost everything. Again. Gunfire. Screams. The sound of hell made flesh. When the last man fell, only the rain remained, tapping against the floor, and Luca's heart, barely beating. He dropped beside her. Clara, don't leave me now. Not after everything. She was still breathing, faintly. Her eyes opened, glossy with tears. Is he safe? She whispered. Luca gripped her hand, trembling. He's safe. You saved him. She tried to smile, but her strength was fading. Then it was worth it. His tears came without warning, his forehead pressed to hers. You're not dying, do you hear me? I won't let you, but death doesn't ask permission. It only watches. And waits. The ambulance arrived minutes later, but time felt endless. Clara was carried out, unconscious, pale. Leonardo cried, clinging to his father. Luca held him tight, his eyes hollow. The Bellarosa mansion burned with smoke and memory. Vittoria was gone. Chaos had left its scars. What remained was silence, and the bitter truth that love always demands its price. When the storm settled, Luca walked through the wreckage. Shards of glass and blood covered the floor. In the corner, the teddy bear. He picked it up, wiped its face clean with trembling hands. The same gesture Clara had made that first night. And there, alone in the ruins, he understood. Love hadn't weakened him. It had made him human. And that was more dangerous than any weapon. A white light blinded her. For a moment, Clara thought she was dreaming. The air smelled of ether and despair. The distant hum of machines pulsed like a tired heart. She tried to move her fingers, but her body felt heavy. Then, a voice. Deep. Hoarse. Familiar. Clara. The sound of her name, spoken like a prayer from someone who had never known how to pray. She opened her eyes slowly. Lucas's face was there, pale, exhausted, eyes red from sleepless nights. He held her hand as if afraid time might steal her again. You're safe now, he whispered. Clara tried to smile, but pain rose through her like fire. Leonardo? She breathed. He took a deep breath, and a rare light crossed his eyes. It's fine. And he keeps asking to see his mum. The word pierced through her like light. Mum. Clara closed her eyes, tears mixing with her weakness. He still thinks. Luca interrupted softly, his voice breaking. Let him think so. Let him believe in something pure, even if it's just for one more day. The only sound left was the rhythm of the heart monitor. And within its steady beats, there was love and a silent promise. Luca stood and walked to the window. Outside, the sun was rising over a sea of ruins. The mansion had fallen, but the sky was still there. I've lost everything twice, Clara. But, God, he gave me back what I'd never asked for, a second chance. She watched him, her body weak, but her gaze steady. Then don't waste it. He turned to her, his face torn between power and regret. How could I, when it was you who brought me back to life? For a moment, they looked at each other in silence. There weren't enough words to contain what that moment carried. Pain, love, fear, all of it merged into something sacred. Clara reached out her hand. Luca took it, his fingers carefully intertwining with hers. You saved my son, he said softly. Now let me save you. She smiled faintly. Maybe that's what love is. Saving and being saved at the same time. In the days that followed, Clara slowly began to recover. Luca spent hours by her side, watching the gentle rhythm of her breathing, as though guarding a miracle. Sometimes Leonardo appeared with flowers he'd stolen from the garden. For you, Mum, he'd say. And Clara cried, not from pain, but from tenderness. True love has the power to heal even the wounds destiny never explains. One morning Clara woke to find the room empty. The chair where Luca always sat was vacant, his jacket folded neatly over the backrest. A hollow feeling grew inside her, one even sunlight couldn't fill. On the nightstand a note. I have to settle what's left. I promise I'll return. Her heart tightened. Love always carries the shadow of absence. And yet, she believed, at that very moment, Luca was walking through ruins and memories. The fire had died, but the past still burned. Vittoria was being hunted, but he knew some ghosts are never captured. They just wait for the next mistake. He stopped before the remains of the mansion. The wind carried ashes through the air. Everything I built has fallen, he murmured. But what I felt stayed, and that was more powerful than any empire. Back in the hospital, Clara stared at the white ceiling and thought about fate, about the child who appeared in the rain, the man who swore he didn't know how to love, and how real love is always the least expected. Do you think God plans everything? She whispered. The nurse beside her smiled. Maybe he just puts the pieces back together when the world breaks too much. Clara smiled back. It made sense. That afternoon, the door opened. Luca was there, unshaven, tired, but with that same quiet light in his eyes. They told me to rest, he said, stepping closer. But without you, there's no rest. Clara let out a small laugh. And without me, did you at least eat properly? No, he replied, serious. The laughter faded into silence, a silence full of everything they still hadn't said. Time itself seemed to breathe with them. Clara, he murmured, sitting beside her. I used to think love was weakness, but it's the opposite. It's what kept me standing when everything else collapsed. She looked at him, eyes glistening. Love is the only crime worth committing. Luca smiled. Then we're guilty. Condemned, she corrected gently. But together. And for the first time, the world felt whole. Outside the window, sunlight broke through the clouds. Clara reached toward the light, and Luca did the same. The brightness covered them both in silence, a quiet blessing. Time stopped there, suspended between forgiveness and renewal, between pain and faith. Because sometimes awakening isn't about opening your eyes, it's realizing that love survived even after the end. Months passed since that night of the ambush. Winter gave way to soft sunlight, and the wounds began to heal. The Bellarosa mansion, now in ruins, had become a symbol of rebirth. Luca ordered its reconstruction, not for himself, but for others. Where there had once been pain, a new home was rising, an orphanage for children who, like Leonardo, had lost everything but still believed in love. Clara walked through the newly restored halls, the white walls glowing with afternoon light. Laughter echoed through the open windows. The breeze carried the scent of flowers and promises. Life was returning, simple, beautiful. Leonardo ran through the garden, a new teddy bear in hand, his eyes shining beneath the sun. "Mum, look!" Clara smiled, her heart light. The boy didn't know it, but she owed her life to the love he had taught her to feel. From the veranda, Luca watched in silence. The suits were gone, replaced by a simple shirt. His hands, once marked by power, now bore the traces of work and peace. He no longer commanded, he guided. The power that once ruled through fear now served hope. Clara approached quietly, her footsteps blending with the laughter of children. "Who would have thought one rainy night would change everything?" she said. Lucas smiled, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Sometimes God hides miracles in dangerous places." She looked at him with tenderness. "And we almost missed the miracle we were." He reached out and touched her face gently. "Maybe we had to lose ourselves first." The touch was brief, but full of promises, the kind of gesture that says what words never can. The sun tilted over the sea, bathing the orphanage in shades of gold. The children laughed, running through the flowers. Leonardo grabbed their hands and pulled them toward the garden. "Come play with me." Clara and Luca exchanged a look, one of quiet love, shared gratitude, and peace. They walked side by side, their bare feet brushing the wet grass. For the first time, the world felt whole. The past hadn't vanished, but it weighed less now. Every scar had become a memory, every pain a seed of compassion. Luca looked at Clara, and she knew. The man once made of shadows was now made of light. "Do you believe in redemption?" he asked. Clara smiled softly. "I do. Because I've seen the impossible happen." And in that moment, the impossible was them, alive, together, at peace. The unseen camera pulled back slowly, capturing the sea in the distance, the setting sun, and the sound of children laughing like music. The wind brushed through Clara's hair, and beside her, Lucas stood in silence. There were no vows, no promises, only the certainty that, when love is true, it doesn't need to be spoken. It simply stays. Always. If this story touched you, subscribe and turn on notifications. Many more tales of love, power, and redemption are waiting for you.